So names have many attributes, but attributes do not. So you're not going to call upon Allah as Al-Wajid. You're going to call upon as Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, Al-Malik, Al-Quddus. The names that we present to you, the names that on the sheet of paper are the ones that you will invoke Allah with. And so now I'm going to go towards the last ayat of Surah Hashr and try to explain each of those names. Huwallahu allazi la ilaha illa hu. Whatever is in the heavens and the earth belongs to Allah. Alim al-ghaybi wash-shahada. He knows whatever is hidden. Wallahu alim al-rahman rahim. Actually, the translation doesn't. I think I made an error in the translation. Huwallahu allazi la ilaha illa hu. He is Allah. Allazi la ilaha illa hu, and there is no God except Him. Alim al-ghaybi wash-shahada. He knows what is hidden and what is on the outside. Huwa ar-Rahman rahim, and He is the beneficent, the merciful. This is not anyhow. That's not even the right translation, but that's fine. People do make mistakes. So Al-Alim. Al-Alim is one of the names of Allah, meaning one who knows everything, what is outside and what is inside, what is in the front and what's on the inside. And that's why Alim al-Ghaybi wa-Shahada is an explanation of the name Al-Alim. Huwa ar-Rahman ar-Rahim is again, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim is one of the very first names of Allah, is Ar-Rahman, the one who is beneficial to everyone. And Ar-Rahim is one who is beneficial, who is merciful to the ones on the believers on the day of judgment. Before I continue, I have a question. What is it that you, and this is somewhat rather an interesting question. Did you ever hear the word Allah before this lecture? Where did you hear that? Your friends? Okay. What were they saying?
Well, I had also heard it in like a similar conference where they are kind of explaining religion, and so whenever they would talk about or refer to God, they would say.
Okay. Anyone else? Have you ever heard this phrase before? Or ever heard this word before? In movies? Okay. That is correct. You see the word Allahu Akbar many times in movies. Especially before something bad is going to happen, you have this guy who shouts out the word Allahu Akbar and you are sure something bad is going to happen. Okay, so, and that is in fact, it's very true, and you do see that in Hollywood movies. And that's somehow what has been, it is rather unfortunate, but Allahu Akbar literally means Allah is great. Akbar means God, Allah who is most great, in fact. And therefore this phrase actually does now, thanks to Hollywood, has a very uncomfortable connotation. Because you do happen to see it before everything that seemingly shouldn't be going right. But that is in fact true. That's how it is portrayed. Any person who has heard of this word before? Yes.
I went to a mosque.
You went to a masjid?
Yeah, a mosque, and they were we had to go in as a tour,
Okay.
and they.
And where was this?
Where?
Yeah.
In Italy.
In Italy?
Yes.
That's interesting.
Bilal, something, yeah.
My father was a Protestant minister, and whenever we had eating a meal, he would always pray, God is great, God is good, God is good. So it was actually a Christian prayer, but that was the phrase he used to open.
Okay. That's actually, thank you very much for sharing.
In our last session, we have a Miss Yasmin over here. She also mentioned that the Christians who are living in the Middle East, they also refer to God by saying Allah. So Allah is actually, I think it's obviously an Arabic word, and referring to that there is only one God and no one else. So
that's true
everyone
for
is.
Arabia. I'll give you an example of Pakistan. There are in fact Christians in Pakistan.
So they
I
are,
just want to tell you,
yes,
there
they are
in
also
fact-
referring God to with the name of Allah. So
Yeah, so there are Christians in Pakistan. And Christians by meaning both Catholics and Protestants. And they both refer to God as Allah. And I should tell you, this is interesting to know. There are a lot of Jews in Iran. Okay? You wouldn't believe that, but Iran has a lot of Jewish population. And they all refer to God as Allah. You would assume that there is something definitely wrong, but that in fact is true. So, now continuing with the same, Wallahu allazi la ilaha illa hu. He is Allah. There is no deity like him. Al-Malik. Al-Malik is the owner of everything. Al-Quddus is the one who is most pure, rather all sense of purity emanates from him. Al-Mu'min is the one who is responsible for ensuring belief. Al-Muhaymin is the one who protects. Al-Aziz is the most high, is the most noble. Al-Mutakabbir. Al-Mutakabbir is actually very important. I think this society is very important to recognize. Kibr literally means arrogance. Kibr literally means arrogance. Al-Mutakabbir, now kibr for human beings, it's like this. The greater they rise, the higher they rise, the harder they fall. Something like this. So Al-Mutakabbir is the one who hates kibr, who hates arrogance. And Al-Mutakabbir literally means the one who destroys anyone who has arrogance. So Muslims in fact, and people in general, whenever they want to ask Allah to intervene on their part for an oppressor, they would use the word Al-Mutakabbir, they would use the word Jabbar. Jabbar is the one who forces things to correct. They would use the word Al-Mutakabbir, the one who destroys the arrogant one. Subhanallah amma yushrikun, and there is no one. There's nothing that can be associated with it. Huwa al-khaliq al-bari wal-musawwir. And this is an interesting part because last time we touched upon it, but we didn't really do justice to it. Huwa Allah is the khaliq, the one who creates. Al-bari. Al-bari literally means there is harmony in the sense of change. Al-musawwir is the one who fashions. So last time there was an important question. It was an interesting question because the question was, does theology in general somehow in the West has gone against science? Theology has something to do against science, in fact. In fact, it's interesting to tell you, this did I know before, when the French Revolution happened. In the French Revolution, and that's what's told in general through the movies, through history, during the French Revolution, they did in fact kill all the nobility. They took them to the guillotine. Can anyone tell what's a guillotine? What's a guillotine, Abras?
It was a machine that used to be used to chop their head off.
Yeah, there's a guillotine is
Huge blade coming down.
exactly. It's that big blade that comes down and chops off your neck. So during the French Revolution, and things were in fact bad at that time. Things were so bad that I think this is, I don't know if it's a joke or it's a reality, that somebody asked the queen, we don't have bread to eat, so she said, go buy cake.
Yeah.
Okay? Go get cake.
Let them eat cake.
Sorry?
Let them eat cake. Yeah.
Let them eat cake. So the queen did not know that the cake in fact is more expensive than bread. Okay, and so they didn't have money to buy bread, and she said, let them eat cake. Really, the situation in France at that time was very bad. So they had a French Revolution where they actually collected all the nobility and cut their necks off. What they also did was collect all the ministers, the pastors, the nuns, and they also got their heads cut off. That's something about the French Revolution they don't tell you. That's something about the, actually, I should tell you, whenever there's communism, or whenever there's a communistic movement, whether it was in Russia, I'll give you an example. My professor, during my PhD, my professor was from Romania, and his name was Erkin Sirpudi. And one time we went on for this dinner, and this guy, Erkin Sirpudi, I told him, Professor Erkin Sirpudi, you know, I have a lot of respect for you, but I'm a Muslim. It's just that I can't eat pork, you should know. I only eat zabiha meat. Zabiha is, you know, meat which is cut in a particular way. So just to tell you, let's just, for me, order something vegetarian, because he was going to pay for it. And he looked at me, he said, Bilal, that's how he referenced my name, Bilal, I know what halal is, I'm a Muslim. I said, really? Now, Erkin Sirpudi has no Islamic connotation. But the thing is, in Romania, he was from Romania, when communism came, they shut down not just all the mosques, they shut down the churches, they shut down everything. And the Muslims were in fact forced to change their names to something which had no religious connotation. Even in Russia now, when it was USSR, one of the reasons USSR got rid of Muslim countries, when it broke up, you had Tajikistan, you had Azerbaijan, you had Uzbekistan, you had Turkmenistan, you had all these Muslim countries taken out because there's a problem with Muslims, they just follow their religion. Okay, and that was a problem for them. Because communism tried to finish it, and yet they somehow always adhered to it. Even in China now, which is going into capitalism, China, if you're a Muslim in China, you can't have a beard. You have a beard, you go to jail. If you're a Muslim lady in China and you wear a veil, you go to jail. If you're a Muslim in China and you pray towards, they actually make sure that the flag of China is in front of you. So it's actually rather awkward. But one thing about the West in general, going back to science versus theology, is if you look at the European history, they were profoundly religious in nature. Look at the palaces, look at the churches, look at the architectures, they were profoundly religious in nature. It was and the buildings that they built were supposed to last hundreds and hundreds of years. That's why even now the buildings survive. But yet this problem persisted, and this is a problem which persists in the West, does not really persist in the East, because in the East, for instance, science was never against religion. Science was never against theology. One good reason that I like to present now, again, I should tell you, I'm not an Islamic scholar. Okay, that should be the first thing I should have told you. I'm not an Islamic scholar. At the same time, I just happen to be an electrical engineer who knows a little about computational biology. Actually, that was my PhD thesis on. So I do know something about computational biology. And one of the things that I should tell you is what I'm trying to tell you now is my understanding of it. Who al-Khaliq is the one who creates. Al-Bari is that sense of harmony in change that's perfected. And Al-Musawwir is one who fashions. So as far as Islam is concerned, the whole sense of evolution being against religion, because evolution has this sense of randomness embedded in their principle. That if you do something randomly over and over and over and over and over and over again, something amazing eventually will happen. The Islamic perspective is, in fact, there is a sense of randomness which is embedded within Islamic law and Islamic Sharia. There's a sense of randomness which is embedded in there, but Allah is in the mix. That's the only difference. Allah is in the mix. So, for instance, but at the same time, so I'll explain to you what is Islamic understanding, what my understanding is, and then how does it literally does differ from evolutionary hypothesis. Amongst Muslims, and this is a simple principle, if my sustenance is written in Laredo, I'll end up in Laredo no matter what. If my sustenance is written back in Lahore in Pakistan, I'll end up in Lahore, Pakistan, no matter what. And the way it was beautifully explained was Junaid Baghdadi, Junaid Baghdadi, a very ascetic individual, very well known in Islamic scholarship, who had attained Rida. Rida is a sense, patience is when you are, something happens to you and you're not fully content with it. There's a sense of distaste in your mouth, but you accept it. Rida is being completely satisfied with what happens to you. That goes above being patient. There's a sense of complete acceptance, and that sense of being completely accepting and being happy, contented with what happens to you. Junaid Baghdadi was one day, and the important thing about Junaid Baghdadi was the sense of love that he had for Allah was tremendous. The only thing except Allah that he loved on earth. The only affinity he had with anyone on earth was his son. That's it. Was his son. And so one day he was giving a lecture to the people in the masjid. The masjid is literally a mosque. So he was giving a lecture in the mosque, and what happened was a group of bandits came on horses, and his son had yet not entered the mosque. So what they did, they cut his son's head. They cut his son's head. And at that time, the mosque didn't have any roof. There wasn't any roof in the mosque. So here is Junaid Baghdadi giving a lecture to the audience. The only thing he loves on earth is his son. And yet these group of bandits come, they cut off his head. And while he's giving a lecture, throw his son's head into the mosque. Everybody knew who Junaid Baghdadi was. Everybody knew who his son was. And while everybody was looking at Junaid Baghdadi, his son's head starts falling down onto the ground and rolls towards Junaid Baghdadi's feet. It actually rolls towards him. The entire audience is in complete silence. They don't know what to say. They're just amazed that something like this has actually happened. And what does Junaid Baghdadi do? Junaid Baghdadi looks at his son's head, remains silent for a while, and says the following. He says, what seems so strange today was certain from eternity. What happens for necessity. What seems so strange today was certain from eternity. What happens for necessity. It was meant that his son was to die that day. It's just like if it is written for me to die in San Antonio, and it's going to be very hard for people of my community to ship my body back to Pakistan, because my body has to go back to Pakistan if I die. But the point is, if it is meant for me to die in San Antonio, I'm not going to die in Laredo. I'm just going to die in San Antonio is a beautiful city, but it's just going to be too logistically hard for me to ship me back to Pakistan. But generally what I'm saying is, if somebody is to die in some place, he's supposed to die. That sense of randomness does exist, but Allah is in the mix. That is what Islamic belief is. What seems so random today, but Allah is in fact in the mix.
So it's not really random at all. It's just a lack of human comprehension or understanding.
You could put it nicely in those words. You could put it nicely in those words. And the reason I explain it this way is because every year millions of people want to go for Hajj. Hajj is the biggest gathering for Muslims, is one of the 5 pillars of Islam. And every Muslim, not every Muslim, any Muslim who can afford it and who has no debts to pay and is healthy and has cleared up his requirements should go for Hajj. It becomes mandatory for him. So many people apply for Hajj visa in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia doesn't give it to everyone. What they do is they do a raffle. Or they what's another good word for raffle? Lottery. They do a lottery, okay? So that people, in fact, they are out of this, let's say from Pakistan, if they have to give 100,000 visas to Pakistanis, and a million people have applied, they can't give it to a million people. They have to just give it to 100,000. So they would draw a lottery and draw those 100,000 people randomly. What I want to say, what the Islamic understanding is, what seems random to you, and that's what the sense of Al-Bari is. There's a sense of harmony in this relative sense of change, in this relative, say, sequence of events, which somehow fits in perfectly. So if somebody who's supposed to have his sustenance in Makkah and Medina, this is the place, Makkah is the place where they go for Hajj, they will end up there. And out of those 100,000, and they happen to be amongst the 100,000 who happen to go for Hajj, and that's just the case. Al-Musawwir is the one who eventually fashions it, who gives it a proper shape. Al-Musawwir is the one who eventually fashions it. So, in Islam, the sense of randomness does exist. Islam doesn't shy away from it, but Allah is in the mix. Having said that, having a sense of change without, Muslims don't believe that humans were born out of apes. Okay, Muslims don't believe that. That sense of evolution where there's a speciation event, I don't want to use the word speciation, that it has a different meaning, where from a monkey a human comes, or from a human a monkey comes, or from apes, or eventually everybody was a fish, then they became mammals, and then they became humans. That sense of evolution is not agreed upon in Islam. But Islam doesn't shy away from the sense of randomness. That's why you all look different from me, and I look different from you all. So there is a sense of randomness, but Allah is in the mix. That's why for science, and particularly for Muslims, was never, they never had a problem with science. Lahul Asma'ul Husna, he has the most beautiful names. What is ever in the heavens and the earth, Wahwal Aziz. Glorifies him, Wahwal Aziz al-Hakim. He is Al-Aziz, he is the most noble, and Al-Hakim, he is the most wise. So the point of my, this is the place where I stop. The point of my, this presentation in fact was to give you some idea who Muslims refer to and whom they do love, whom they passionately worship, because Muslims in fact worship Allah 5 times a day. They actually wake up, well, I should tell you, they should wake up. I have a problem waking up early morning because I sleep late. But Muslims who are, let me put it this way, Muslims are required to worship Allah 5 times a day. And there are millions and millions who actually do that. Now, if it's just a requirement, you wouldn't do that. There is that sense of love, there is that sense of passion, there is that sense of affinity that exists amongst the Muslims that causes them to do exactly that. It's one of the reasons why Muslims do what they do. In fact, the whole idea of theology is everything derives from La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah for Muslims. There is no God except Allah. So for us, all our references go back to Quran, and Muhammad Rasulullah is the last messenger. And so his action and his deeds are an explanation of what the Quran has to say. But Muslims make it a point on differentiating the Quran from what Prophet Muhammad said. What he said is another compilation which is called Hadith, and it's not part of the Quran. At this point, I would be having any reflections or questions or suggestions or remarks. I didn't put questions and answers. I actually put questions, comments, suggestions, reflections, discussion, remarks, observation, consideration, deliberations, because I just don't like question and answer. It's just too blunt. It's just too sad. Okay, so let me ask you something. If you don't have any questions. What is the difference? Can you tell me God in general? And did you notice something interesting here? This is the entire presentation. Actually, this is the entire presentation. Did you see any pictures in there? Last time, there's an interesting question, and I pointed it out. For any prophet of God, we don't put any pictures of him. Why is it that you don't see any pictures for Allah? Do Muslims not like pictures? They just don't like pictures. Is that the reason? Maybe they don't. I mean, have you ever thought about it? It's just that it's a Muslim thing, they're very dry. Yes.
I've never actually because I read it a little bit, but it says that once you see them in human form, it takes away from them being divine.
Okay.
So
Okay. So one of the ladies mentioned that if you draw them in the form of human, that takes away from them the sense of being divine. Have I rephrased it correctly? Okay. Anyone else? Maybe because Muslims are dry. They're dull. They don't like pictures.
No one knows what he looks like. Nobody's seen him.
Sorry?
Nobody's seen him. Nobody knows what he looks like.
Okay. I heard something else as well.
He is all and he is none, so there is no picture.
Sorry?
He is all and he is none, so he can be anything. Allah can be any being, so why would there be a picture for a particular person when he is not?
You used a lot of words, and I'm trying to understand what they mean. Could you rephrase it?
So he is everything and he is nothing. There is no pictures to describe something that can be all, and yet there is also no pictures that can describe something that can be nothing.
It's kind of like when I was in Islamic school when I was small, the way they described it to us is the reason that in Islam there's no pictures of prophets or especially of God is because of the fact that, first of all, it's disrespectful because this is something holy, but also because it's beyond our comprehension. We've never seen it, there are no pictures, and also when we draw pictures, we're trying to capture something, and that takes away from our own humility. You see what I mean?
Nicely put. Actually, the lady also nicely put it. Kunsia.
I was going to agree with what she said. What I was taught in Islamic school in Laredo was that we can't behold him. We can't see him, like she said. And it's like trying to draw something that you haven't seen. And whenever you try to draw, you add on to your perception how you see things, which will take away from the actual truth.
So, does anybody have any other? Yes.
Well, you are signifying, though, by making a sign. So, if I were to read Arabic, I would be seeing a sign of a thing, which brings something into my head. I'm not sure I understand how much that really differs from a picture of that.
That's
So
a
the
very
anthropomorphization of it may be common.
exactly. So
The idea of it being humanly based.
that's a beautiful comment. In fact, I should tell you this. What you see over here is the way you write Allah in Arabic. You write Allah in Arabic. So whenever you have to communicate to someone, you're going to write words. So all the names, in fact, are words. These are names, they're not pictures.
Right.
Now, one of the things which is interesting, and that's how I actually, with the way I begin this presentation, was I discussed the word huwa first. He. So Allah is in fact beyond gender. He's neither a he nor a she. In fact, the last time one of the audience mentioned something profoundly beautiful, and he said, and so let me ask you this: Thou shalt not make any graven image of God in the heavens above, in the earth beneath, or what is beneath the earth. Where do you heard this?
Old Testament.
Sorry? And what is it? It's one of the Ten Commandments. Thou shalt not make any graven image of God in the heavens above, in the earth beneath, and the water beneath the earth. This is one of the 10 Commandments. And one of the beautiful things that one of the guys mentioned was the Jews did in fact make the golden calf. The golden calf. Now think about this for a second. Why on earth, think about it, why on earth, these were, Hazrat Musa alayhi salam, Moses took this entire Israelites from the Nile onto the desert Sinai, and they ended up making a golden calf. Why not the golden lion? It's the king of the jungle.
They weren't in the jungle.
Yeah, they weren't in the jungle, so why not make the golden camel? Camel is the ship of the desert. It was the camels that were taking all their stuff. Why not the camel? Why the calf? Have you ever thought about it?
Didn't they have any pagan religions that worship the cat because they got milk and meat and everything from it?
Anyone else?
It came from the Egyptian, their culture, that they were escaping.
It came from the Egyptian culture. In fact, and this is important to understand, when you look at the Egyptian mythology, now actually I'll tell you, one of my students her name is, oh my God, there's stuff on the table. Okay. Can I get a tissue paper? Because there's stuff on the table. So anyhow, it's all on my pad, on the wrong side of the pad. So there's nothing wrong with my pad, it's just I just sat in the wrong place. But anyhow, going back, think about this. In Egyptian mythology, you have depictions of God. Now in Egyptian mythology, now yes, what I was saying, one of my students, her name is Osiris, and I was actually shocked to hear that name. I've never heard that word ever before, except in Egyptian mythology. Osiris was one of the Egyptian gods. I'll give you the example of sun. The sun, which is the sun, has always been worshipped throughout history. Even now, people do worship the sun. Can you tell me who worships the sun today? Sorry? I'll come to that. So, the sun has always been worshipped. In the Greek mythology, the sun was what? Apollo. Have you ever heard the satellite named Apollo? The sun has always been worshipped, and the name of this Greek god is Apollo. If you look at Apollo, Apollo is this Greek individual. He's literally Greek. He's this white guy who's very muscular, and he looks Greek. Let me show this. He looks Greek. If you look at the Egyptian mythology, the sun was always worshipped by the name of Ra. Ra is an Egyptian god, but Egyptians have this slight taste to it. All their gods have the body of a human, but the head is different. So you have Egyptian gods which have human bodies, but their face looks like a cat. Okay? Has anybody seen the mummy? Okay, so you have gods that look like scorpions. Okay? The Egyptian mythology, Ra, which is the sun god, had the body of a human, but the head was that of an eagle. And it kind of does make sense. An eagle's soars are very high. And when it looks on the ground, it has very good eyesight. It actually looks on the ground from this high and can dive down and catch its prey. So for sun, it somehow makes sense that the head would look like an eagle. If you go from Egypt to Persia, the sun god was called Mithra. Mithra is a Persian guy. You know how Persians look like? How do Persians look like? Does anybody know how Persians look like? Yes.
Yes, I know how Persians
So Persians, now the Mithra is a very strong individual. The skin tone of Mithra looks very similar to Persians. He looks very similar to a Persian general during the Persian Empire. He looks like a general, and he's a very muscular man, and he holds two lions. If you Google him, you'll see Mithra holding two lions. This guy is so strong, he actually has two lions as dogs. If you go to India, Hindus still worship the sun. Hindus, in fact, still worship the sun. Now, the name of the sun god is not hitting my mind, if you Google him, he looks Indian. He actually looks Indian. This guy is standing on a chariot, and behind him is this halo thing, which is beaming off light. And in front of him are like 10 or 12 stallions. And he's holding this chariot. He looks Indian, for God's sake. He looks like an Indian gentleman. Okay? The point what I want to make is, Islam makes it a point, and that's why Osiris is important. Osiris was the son, like the son daughter of the sun, which was Ra. Osiris had the body of a human, but the head of a calf. Not a cow, head of a calf. And Osiris has a beautiful story. In the Egyptian mythology, Osiris has a beautiful story. He's this ever-loving, powerful gentleman, and he actually has a beautiful story. So when these guys went out into the mountains and into the desert, and they were waiting for Hazrat Musa alayhi salam from coming down from the mountain, he was there, he didn't know whether he was alive or dead, they were just freaking out over there, and they wanted to make God, somehow the golden calf made sense. It wasn't the lion, it wasn't the camel, it somehow was the calf. And that was their association, as she pointed out, with their beliefs earlier, because that's where they lived. For Islam, and this is where Islam clearly makes it a point. Islam clearly makes it a point. And that's why one of the first answers was, no one has seen him. If Adam never saw God, even Moses, Hazrat Musa alayhi salam, who's considered Kalimullah, the one who spoke to God, spoke to him behind a burning bush. Spoke to him behind a burning bush. Last time we talked about the ayats that specifically that we chose to discuss.